The last piece of my Edwardian Winter outfit is a cape. And I specifically wanted one that would go a little down from the elbow, would cover up enough of my torso, and would not be super long to hide the skirt. And I found an excellent choice for it in the Voice of Fashion on page 173. Now this particular pattern was almost perfect in that it had the right general shape. I liked that it had a tartan on the inside, but of course that has nothing to do with the pattern. And I don't know, I just really liked how it looked and how it hung. But there were a couple of things that I didn't like about the pattern that I definitely wanted to change. One of those was the collar. For some reason it had this like split part collar, which was kind of odd looking. And it also had some quote-unquote drapery, which I could not for the life of me figure out how it was supposed to attach to the yoke and cape. It didn't really make much sense to me. So instead of trying to figure out those complicated things which didn't make any sense, I started searching online for reference images. I like having historical fashion plates or actual historical photographed items to base my designs off of, just because that will let me be a little bit more historically plausible at least, and it helps me figure out what would look right at the time. Even if I can't make it exactly the same way, maybe I can make it look at least similar. And a lot of these designs had fur on the collars and down the front, and I thought that would look really pretty with the general vibe that I've been building with this, which is rosy pinks and burgundies plus black. And I thought that was a really nice way to tie everything together. Hello? Oh. Are you going to be the star of this video too? How's that? This isn't really what you were hoping for. You want to snuggle? Now, I actually drafted the basic pattern for the cape way back in December, I think it was, when I was also drafting the pattern for the skirt. Partially because it was a good day to spread out in the dining room and draw big things, but also because I wanted to know if I wasn't able to make the skirt out of that plaid fabric, if I would at least be able to make the cape. Thankfully, I was able to make the skirt out of that, and I didn't really need to use the cape pattern much since then. Yes, I had a breath. There we go. Hey there. Okay, bye-bye. The first thing I did, because I was trying to be a good little seamstress, was to make a prototype. Now, again, like the skirt, this is a rather large pattern, and I didn't want to make the entire thing ahead of time, because that would be a little bit frustrating. So I just made like a little past the shoulders. So I tried it on, and it was immediately lovely. I absolutely loved the shape of it, so I moved ahead to the next step, which was going to be the collar. Now initially I wasn't really sure how I was going to make the collar. I was kind of basing it off of how I had made coat collars before. So I had a separate little piece for like the band of the collar and then the top of the collar. And it just didn't look quite right. I really liked how most of the capes, especially the ones with fur on them, had this really straight front and were really high up to the ears, and I couldn't quite figure out how to do that. Thankfully, my community over on Instagram gave me a few ideas, and I ended up changing the collar completely to just be a longer rectangle. Okay, so we're trying a brand new idea for the collar. I think we were getting close with that square collar thing, but looking back, I feel like it almost feels more like a trench coat. You know, when you have the collar up like this, and then like these kind of fall down a little bit. That's what it feels like when you look at the way that this part of the collar
spreads, it looks more like this, which you probably can't even see because my shirt is dark. But I think you kind of get what I mean. So what I'm trying this time is a long tube that just comes straight up, like so. So we don't have like two separate pieces, it's just this one rectangle.
That worked perfectly. I was so very happy with it. Though I did notice that it felt a little snug, which worried me because I knew that I was going to be making the actual one out of much thicker fabric, wool and flannel, plus I was going to have fur in there somewhere. So to measure a new collar, I took the fur, just a little bit of it, so I turned it inside out so the fur was next to my skin and I held it up so it would be comfortably snug. And that ended up being about 18 inches, so that's what I moved forward with. So the next thing I did was I measured around the neckline of the cape yoke pattern and realized that it was a little too small for the collar. And I decided that I would increase the cape pattern by as much as I was increasing the collar pattern. So I basically just drew radial lines out from the center of the cape pattern and the yoke pattern and just added a few little strips of paper to try to make up for that extra space. Next, I went ahead and cut out all of my fabric. I attached the yoke to the cape and that part worked fine. From work last night, I am very happy with how this is progressing. I think the edging on the yoke is definitely the way to go because this adds just such a cute little detail. I'm so happy with this. And then I added on the collar. And this is where things got frustrating because somehow I had severely miscalculated and there was way too much yoke for the collar. The collar was not nearly long enough for the yoke. And the fastest thing would have been to make the collar bigger, but I didn't want to because already the collar felt like pretty much precisely the right size. So I thought about it. I took the collar off of the cape and tried to figure out if there was a way for me to take off just a part of the front of the yoke on both sides and just trim it in a way where the curve would still look nice and we would have trimmed away enough to make the collar fit. So I tried that, and I originally tried it on the second prototype that I had done, and I trimmed off the front, and it seemed to go back together okay. And then I added a collar, because apparently I had not actually made a collar to attach to that second prototype, which would have saved me all of these problems. So I put the collar onto the modified cape prototype, and decided that the smaller change seemed to work enough, even though it was only 3/4 of an inch instead of a whole inch. And I tried it back on the actual cape. I trimmed away the same amount, and it seemed to be going okay, although I was noticing that I was probably losing more fabric than I was expecting to, because as soon as you start unpicking this wool, it starts kind of falling apart. And surprisingly, the worst offender in this category was by far the flannel, because the flannel just kind of ate up the thread and it was extremely difficult to pick it. I put the collar back on and it still wasn't perfect. The front was still being weird. I still wasn't getting the right curves in the right places, so I said, okay, enough. We're just going to make the yoke a couple of sizes bigger. And it worked out quite well. I had to change the order of steps that I was taking in order to put the cape together, because my original plan was to start with the cape pattern and kind of tuck the yoke between the two layers of the cape pattern and then stitch over it. So I placed the new yoke and then I added the collar back on, and finally things seemed to be working. I ended up doing the hem kind of similarly to the skirt a little bit. I put on a layer of bias tape onto the very bottom of the pattern, and then I tucked it up and whip stitched it in place all the way around, and I think it turned out lovely. I am very happy with how even it looks and the fact that I didn't have to add an extra layer of wool and flannel for turning over and everything. So I really like this method of hemming, and I think I'm going to be doing this a lot because it's invisible from the outside and it looks really neat on the inside. Now, there were a lot of other little things that I had to figure out as I was going, but I think that covers most of generally what went wrong. Now, I am so happy with how this has turned out. I think it's absolutely beautiful. I'm so happy I went ahead and did the black fur trim down the front. It's very cozy and kind of helps hide where it meets. Unfortunately, due to how many things went wrong, it's not technically finished at this point. The front clasp, the lower one, had somehow gotten bent during shipping or something, and so I used some of my jewelry pliers to try to open it up just enough to be able to use it, and it snapped. So I need to find another one or glue back on that piece again, but it's never going to be all that strong. So I am also looking for maybe some new clasps of some kind, although I do really like the design of these. But for right now, they look fine. It's just one of them doesn't close very well. I also need to finish adding in the flannel on the lining, which basically I'm just going to have bias tape all around all of those edges, and then I'm going to just kind of whip stitch it in place because it's structurally sound. It just doesn't have that bit yet, and there's going to be a lot of finagling over here, and all of these seams are so small it'll be quite difficult to maneuver it under the machine like this. So I'm just going to put bias tape on the edges and then whip stitch it in place. Okay, so I just wanted to mention, I wanted to just point out here in flipped around camera mode, some things that I absolutely love about this design. Number one, I am so glad that my mom and a few of my followers encouraged me to go ahead and put the black on this seam here because I think it is gorgeous. I love how that turned out, and it kind of gives a nod to what they had originally designed, which was like this whole draping thing. I decided not to do that because I wanted to keep it pretty simple other than the fur, but this kind of gives a similar look, which I think is just lovely. As you can see here in the back, we have a little pleat. Also, another thing that is a concern is that it opens up very easily, and given that I don't have anything planned to wear under this other than just the shirt, that's not ideal. So what I was thinking I could do would be to just put in a bunch of little hook and eyes. Let me show you. These little guys, and these are actually coat-specific hook and eyes, so they're a bit bigger than what you would normally expect. And what I think I'm going to do is only put them down to maybe about here, or like maybe here, so that not the entire thing, because you want it to be able to open up a little bit so you can move your arms. But I think if we have it to like the bust line or just a little bit below, we have like 1, 2, maybe 3 kind of hidden behind the fur. I think that will help it stay nice and closed and warm on the chest while still letting me have a little bit of maneuverability down here. So that's my plan for the closure. I love the fact that this collar turned out basically perfect. Like, I don't even know if you can see in this lighting setup, but like the straight across here was exactly what I was noticing. Also, notice how high up it is compared to my ears, and the fur and the wideness give it exactly that look that I thought was super exaggerated in the pictures, because it was like their face and then this with no neck and like without it looking crazy tall. It was up to their ears, and I thought that was an exaggeration, but no, this actually worked out pretty much perfectly. There is so much that I absolutely love about this cape, and I am so glad I have it. So I am a little bit sad that I wasn't able to really finish it. You can see here, let me just take it off. In the lining, we're still missing that whole section of lining. I just need to put that in. For now, I am so happy with how it's going. Everything else is just extra little detail work that I just ran out of time for in this month. So I am so happy with how this project turned out. I absolutely love this cape. I am so excited to see the entire costume together. I've not had a moment to actually put the whole thing on, just because this wasn't a super fitted garment, so I didn't have to try it on top of everything like I did with the skirt. but I am very much looking forward to that. Next month, I believe, should be the grand finale, in which I go through every single piece. I'll tell you a little bit about it, when about it was, what inspiration I had, and also share with you the hat which I am making. I'll show you a sneak peek real quick. Here is the start of it. This is the brim. So it's not going to be super complicated. It's going to be a decent size. It's going to be wool and velvet, and yeah, my hair is messed up for this, so don't go too much by it like this. But yeah, a little dramatic, a little big, a little cute, and I'm hoping to be brave enough to put some velvet on it, because I do have some very pretty black velvet, and my book says that velvet was quite a common hat covering material. So tune in next month to see everything come together. I still want to add more pieces to this. Like, I'd love to have a vest. I'd love to have like a jacket I could wear under the cape. And I have tons of this wool left over, so we might even be able to make another skirt or something out of it. Let me know what you guys would like to see out of this purple wool, because like I said, I have tons of it left. And yeah, tune in next month to see the grand finale with the entire costume put together. I'm not going to spoil it yet because it's not quite prepared. And yeah, so thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next month. Bye!